we are arguing in this series is the most provocative life to live. It's amazing that we're celebrating Alpha and we're thinking and turning our minds to evangelism. And it's really interesting for our culture because culture today doesn't want to hear a truth. It doesn't want to hear what we've got to say, but it does want to see how we live our lives. And I think that's the most powerful form of evangelism, is the provocative life. What we do is being seen by the world. What we say is sometimes seen with suspicion or indifference. So what we do is so important. So the provocative life is so important when we're thinking about evangelism. So far in the provocative life, we've had a lovely introduction, week one. Last week, the provocative life is one that chooses community. Tom Holbert, online now on our YouTube channel. You can catch up on that one. And this week, I'd love to talk about the provocative life is one that chooses compassion. And as always, we're going to read a bit of the Bible, and we'll have a bit of a natter, and we'll see what that tells us about compassion. And hopefully we will land transformed and filled with the love of God. So we are going to take a reading from Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. It's on the screen, so I shall read for you. It says this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord has forgiven you. And over all of these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." There's two things I want to ponder this morning and chat about with you this morning. And the first is a vision of who God is. And the second is a vision of who you are. It's a vision of who God is and a vision of who you are. And I'd love to start by just looking at two words. I'm writing essays at the moment, and I'm still in essay mode. So the first thing you do in essays, do a little bit of definition. So bear with me. This is the technical bit. Don't fall asleep. But we're going to do a little bit of technical with these two words: compassion and kindness. Because scholars, when they write about this passage, combine these virtues. They combine compassion and kindness, and they combine humility with gentleness and patience. And this pairing means that the fullest understanding of compassion is with another word. And we see this elsewhere in the Bible, this pairing. We see it in Exodus 34. And this is Moses and God together. God is giving Moses a download of his manifesto. He's telling Moses who he is. He's explaining who he is to Moses. And he says, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. And here we see two words, another word with compassion and graciousness. They're paired. And together they give us the fullest meaning of compassion. Let me explain. So taking our New Testament reading, the Greek for compassion means literally like a physical felt gut feeling for somebody. It's like an inner pain. It's like you're feeling the other person's suffering. I don't know if anyone has been tested positive for COVID in your house. We had this a few weeks ago. And I was fine a minute before that said negative, that result. And a minute later, I thought I had a headache. I thought I was getting warmer. I thought my throat was getting sorer. Compassion is like sympathy pains for the person. It's a feeling. The Hebrew for compassion in our Exodus reading means something similar but slightly different. It literally means the female womb. The way a mother yearns or feels the pain of her crying baby. A natural desire to want to do something about the crying baby. And then if we look at kindness and graciousness, so kindness is in Greek, and it means useful. It just means that something useful, but for somebody else. It's an action word. It's what you do to somebody else. And graciousness in Hebrew, similar. It means to show grace. It means to show favor. It's also something that we do. So in other words, we've got compassion, which is an inward emotion. And then we've got kindness or graciousness, which is the outward action of that inward pain, if that inward feeling, if that makes sense. They're paired together. They can't be separated. It's two sides of one coin. You cannot split them, and they cannot be split. It reminds me of a story when we had a baby. In fact, for both of our babies, and probably some nights in our recent history, where in the Lord only knows what hour in darkness, there's a cry out in the middle of the night. And it's been India and it's been Zavi. And Tara and I both wake up and we have a gut yearning feeling inside for what is going on in that room, what is going on for that little person. And then as I roll over, put a pillow over my ear and go back to sleep, Tara, as like a bullet, has gone out the room. She's got Calpol. She's got a syringe. She's grabbed a muslin, the wipes, and a nappy, and she's gone into action. And in the morning, when I've had 11 hours of unbroken sleep, Tara's probably patched together 3 or 4 hours somewhere evening, and she looks to me and says, "Where were you?" And my response is, "Well, I'm so sorry. I was a little bit sleepy last night. I've had a stressful week. So busy at work. Tom's demanding boss. I have to do all his work, all his admin. It's a nightmare." And her response is, "It's just not good enough." And it ain't good enough, if I'm honest. One of us showed what true compassion was, what the full meaning of compassion is. One of us didn't. And I don't want to put Tara in it, but I'll leave you to guess which one of us it wasn't. These two words are a pair. We can't split them. Compassion is about feeling something, and it's about doing something. They cannot be separated. Or at least they can't be separated. I found a good way to separate them. They cannot be separated in God. God is always both. Whenever we read the word compassion, I think it's 41 times it comes up in the Bible, mostly on its own. We read it with both. Great compassion and kindness, compassion and graciousness, because God is both. But God has that inner gut feeling for you of what you're experiencing. But he also has the motivation to move and to come towards you with kindness, with graciousness. We read this in other places in the Bible. The parables are a great place. When Jesus talks about the parable of the Good Samaritan, where the Samaritan feels the inner pangs for that poor bloke who's been beaten the living Jesus out of on the side of the road. But he moves towards him. He heals his wounds. He pays for him to stay in an inn. We read it in the prodigal son, where the son has gone off and lived a wayward life, but the father is yearning internally for him. The pain is apparent in the father. And when the son returns, who just wants to be a helping hand on his father's farm, the father moves towards him. There's action, there's kindness, and there's graciousness. Puts on a ring, he puts on a robe, he kills the fattened calf. They have a massive party, and he restores him back to his sonship in the family. He's going to be no servant on his father's farm. Jesus really wanted us to understand something about God. That he is always compassionate and kind. He's always feeling and he's always moving into your life. Isaiah puts this brilliantly. Chapter 49, verse 15. When he's arguing who God is, he says, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born?" No, he says, and neither can God. God cannot not be compassionate. He is compassion. The provocative life is one that has a vision of who God is, that is gracious, whose innermost feeling yearns for you. He wants to be a father. He wants to be a nurturing mother to you. And he wants to move and he wants to act in your life of what troubles you. And I think this is hugely important because who we think God is directly influences the trajectory for the rest of our lives. It impacts our identity and who we are. I'd love for us today to get this vision of who God is: compassionate and kind, inward feeling, outward action towards us at all times, both at all times. Because who you think God is dictates the story that your life tells. Let's get a vision of who God is: the gracious God. No more wrathful God. No more angry God. No more God that wants to give us rules to live by and restrict our lives. Let's have a vision of God who is compassionate and kind and wants nothing but the best for us. And I'd love to also talk about a vision of who you are as well. Paul says in this passage, clothe yourselves with compassion and kindness. Other translations say put on. I think the Message is the best one. It says, dress in the wardrobe God has picked out for you. I love that. Compassion is something we choose. We put it on. It's a little bit like love. When I wake up in the morning and I've had 11 hours kip and Tara's patched together 3 or 4, she has to choose to love me on those mornings. It don't come easy. When I was 6 and we didn't have any baked beans left, and I had to settle for spaghetti hoops, and in an outrage I kicked and smashed our glass front door, my parents had to choose to love me that morning. Compassion is the same. It's something we choose. It's something we put on. And Paul is encouraging us to restrain our natural reaction towards the difficulties in our lives. In the passages before this, he's asking us to take other stuff off. He's asking us to take all the crap in our lives off where we mess up, where we live like we shouldn't live. And then he's telling us to put on, to clothe ourselves with a deep sensitivity to the needs and the sorrows of others. And his motivation, his encouragement for this is that God has a deep sensitivity, a deeper sensitivity to our needs, to our sorrows. Paul is not demanding it. He's not written a set of rules and a set of instructions for us as followers of Jesus. He's reminding us that we have a compassionate God first and foremost, who is both feeling and action in his compassion to us, and that we are to receive this regularly. He's reminding us of our calling. He's giving us a vision for our lives. I would love us to leave with a vision of who God is: gracious, kind, compassionate. And I would love us to leave with a vision of who we are, what we were made for, what we were created for, what we are called to live out in this world. Paul says that you are God's chosen people. You are holy and dearly loved, not because of anything you do, but because of his grace. And because of his compassion and his grace on us, we can clothe ourselves with what we receive. We can clothe ourselves with that compassion. We have the model for us. We're called to the compassionate life because we are recipients of compassion. We are vessels for it. We receive it, we hold it, and we can give it. The provocative life is one that chooses compassion. Because when the world sees it, when it sees it at work in you and I, it sees the compassionate God and the compassion that God has for them. And that is the most provocative life. Amen.